start. So we'll let people in now.
I'll close down all the other crap that's in the background.
How are you getting on, folks? I see a bunch of you popping in. You're all a bit camera shy today, or have I disabled the ability to turn that on? Oh, there's Owen. Thank you for joining us, folks. We're just going to give it, as per usual, we're going to give it a few minutes before we formally start, just to let anyone who are joining a small bit late join in. Obviously, Alex, happy Thanksgiving in the meantime.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
And it was a great Thanksgiving for was it the Slovenians who just beat Spurs 2-1 in the Europa Conference League. So that's what it was. One of those things, Alex, where I had bet on Spurs to win, but it's one of those win-wins, because I despise the club so much that if the bet had come off, happy days, I got some money, and when they lose, oh well, Spurs lost, like, you know. So I don't know, there's probably no football fans on the chat, but you know. But
yeah, what are the chances of offending the Spurs? Oh no, there we go.
Oh geez, sorry, Declan. I did not actually see your jersey. Actually, that comment was.
I was just gonna say, there's no Spurs fans here. No, and then Declan was showing off his.
When I said I despise Spurs, I didn't mean it. I just
in a friendly way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually, on some level, I have great affection for the club, but it's just the level of pomposity and arrogance that goes around the club sometimes when they're doing well for a club that never wins anything is just, that's what annoys me rather than the club itself. But you know, I'm sure you can understand that, Declan. We have him muted, but he said something there. I'm sure probably had a few expletives in it, but anyway. Right, well, that's been a few minutes of me putting my foot in the mouth, as Cormac said there. So I was literally just thinking, what can I say to fill the dead air, Alex? And literally that was the last thing I did, was watch the end of that Spurs games before I sat in front of the laptop. So here we are. Now let's forget all that and actually formally start. Folks, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is tasting number 11, I think, of the Celtic Whiskey Fest, and one that since the list came out, I've been really, really looking forward to. These are phenomenal whiskies. We've been lucky to have a couple of them feature on a previous tastings we've done with Alex since this whole pandemic started. But before, you know, you don't need to hear from me, and you've already heard me waffle on about Spurs. So before I pass over to Alex to introduce himself and are
there any other teams that you despise?
Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool, you know, the list is quite long. The beauty about football, Alex, as you well know, is that you support your club, but then even when they're doing badly, you have the schadenfreude of other clubs doing badly as well. That's what makes the whole thing so successful as a business model, I suppose. But yeah. But before I pass over to you, Alex, to introduce yourself and the whiskies, I would like everyone who's listening in to please keep your tasting notes, your questions, your comments coming in the chat. The best tastings are the ones that have all that interaction coming in. So please don't be shy about typing out what you feel about the whiskies and about my terrible hosting up to this point. So without further ado, Alex, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? Obviously.
Yeah, I was. Sure, absolutely. So my name is Alex Chasko. For those of you that haven't met me before, I'm the master distiller, master blender at the Teeling Whiskey Company. I'm basically the guy who's in charge of the whiskey. I'm also employee number 1 in the Teeling Whiskey Company. So it was myself and Jack Teeling there in the beginning. And Stephen came on, maybe about 6 months after we got things going. And we've now grown, obviously, over the years. That was 2012, and then things have grown quite a bit from there. We've got well over 100 employees of the company. We're in, I think, 60, maybe even 70 now countries. It's always expanding, and the number of places that we're going into is growing, which is great. And there's a few things that we've done at Teeling that I think is really special over the years. I think that we've done a great job of putting flavor forward I guess, with Irish whiskey. I know that that's a bit of a marketing jargon that people like to talk about, like, oh, it's all about the flavor. But like, when we genuinely like don't have the big marketing budget, right? So when I say that it's all about the flavor, I'm actually talking about like going out into the warehouse and tasting casks of whiskey, and like that's really what we have, right? We leave it all in the bottle there. And these three whiskeys, I think, are a great example of that, of how do you take very old single malt, right? Single malt that, I'll be honest with you, like I didn't make, I don't, I always think that it's kind of weird. People come like, oh, did you make this whiskey? Well, no, it's like yeast, right? Yeast ate the sugar and created the alcohol, right? No human makes a whiskey, right? Yeast makes it. But anyways, was I there for the milling, the mashing, the fermentation, and the distillation of this whiskey? Absolutely not. These whiskeys were all made in oddly enough, September of 1991. They were all made in a relatively short period of time. And my involvement with it has been more of the what are we going to do with it now that it's an aged single malt, now that it's come of age, right? What are we going to do to try and put the best foot forward? So that's the story in a nutshell that I'm going to try and tell this evening. And I want to say, like, normally, yeah, we do have a lot of the chat on the side there, but it's a relatively small group. I think if people have questions, feel free to interrupt me and ask a question. I don't have any problem with that, with being a small group. Obviously, if it's like, a large number of people and people's dogs or kids are yelling in the background or whatever, that's another thing. But like, yeah, if you've
well, what I can do, if you want, folks, up to everyone in the chat, is I will allow people the option to unmute themselves. I will just say before we do that, though, this is going to be recorded and sent out to everyone. There's a lot more who bought the packs who aren't live with us now. So if you are going to which you're more than welcome to pop in and ask a question, just know that you will be in doing so, you'll be consenting to being captured forever on that recording. So yeah, once we've got that bit of housekeeping out the way, I'll let you carry on, Alex.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Like, we got a question there. I think it's probably a good place to start. Where, okay, if the company is only 9 years old, where did these whiskeys come from? Where these whiskeys came from is what I like to refer to as the Teeling Family Reserve. Now, they don't ever call it that, in fairness to them, right? That's not but that's my sort of take on it. Over the years, the Teelings have, John Teeling would have set up the Cooley Distillery back in the 80s, right? And if you've set up a whiskey distillery and you've got access to a bonded warehouse, that affords you certain options that normal people don't have, and that you can buy spirits, right, and not pay the tax on it. And the tax is the really important thing, though, right? Because 32 euros per liter of alcohol the Irish government puts on every bottle that goes out, right? I'm just going to grab a bottle to try and explain that. But like, yes, so if you can buy and a normal bourbon cask, you probably have around 90 to 100 liters of pure alcohol in it, right? So if you can buy a barrel and not have to pay the 3.5 grand, call it, of tax, right? That gives you certain opportunities that normal people just don't have. And so what John Teeling would do with that, and did do with that, and still continues to do with it to this day, is buy excess stock. So let's give 2 examples of what can happen there. One, let's say the Cooley Distillery has, I don't know, a new Locks or a new Kilbeggan product, right? And they're thinking, oh, this is going to be great. Sales are going to be amazing, right? And we're going to bottle 100,000 cases of this, right? And then it doesn't quite do so good, right? And nobody wants to have the name attached to it. Everybody's like, oh my God, what were we thinking? 100,000 cases. What kind of fools are we, right? And you've still got 2,000 barrels of it in the warehouse, right? And you go to the sales guys and you're like, oh, we've got another 2,000 barrels. Like, that's like another 200,000 cases, right? Are we going to make another 200,000 cases of this flop? And we go like, no, are you kidding me? Like, absolutely not. And that's where John Teeling would say, all right, I'll buy it. I'll take that stock off of the company's sheets, so to speak, right, and put it onto his own private sheets, right? And sometimes he would have sold that back to the company. Sometimes in maybe 4 or 5 years, he'd say, all right, I bought it for 100 euros a liter, right? I'm just making up numbers here. And I'll sell it back to the company at 120 euros a liter, or sell it back at a loss for whatever reason, or what have you, right? Whatever the situations were financially, they would have that ability to do that. Also,
it sounds like what John Delaney was doing with the FAI. To keep the football team going.
I'm not so sure how much joined up thinking there was going on with it. He's a very smart man. I'm not trying to say that with Mr. Teeling, but I think there was more survival, to be fair, in those early days than anything else. But what also would happen is a competitor, let's say another Irish whiskey distillery, right, would have excess stock, and they, didn't want to have a bad quarter, or they didn't want to, let on that sales were slipping as much as they were, right? A good way that they could try and make up for lost sales was to go and knock on the door of John Teeling and say, John, are you interested in buying some 8-year-old single malt? Are you interested in buying this? And they would from time to time buy that. So this is all stock that the Teelings as a family would have had, right? Either to sell back to Cooley or to sell on to somebody else, or many times I think that it was just a matter of, we can't go back to 1991 and make more whiskey, right? There's a limited number of these barrels in existence, not known exactly how much that is, but you could probably guesstimate that it's, in the thousands. And all right, if we buy 500 of them, then we've got a pretty good hold on whatever is going to be coming out. You know what I mean? So, so that was probably the thinking that was going on there. And what I was explaining to Luke, the story that I'd like to tell with that regard is that these casks, when I first saw them, was when the Teeling Whiskey Company was set up. So they would have been in a separate warehouse completely at Cooley, down in Quebecan. That wasn't where the normal.
Because just to put some context on that, Alex, you were obviously with Cooley.
Oh, sorry.
Or coming to Teeling, as you mentioned. So you would have been in this period you're talking about. You wouldn't have seen them because in the family warehouse, you're obviously working for Teeling or for.
I was working for Cooley. I was the innovation manager at Cooley. So my job was to go around and to come up with the new whiskeys, the new things that we were going to come out with. So would have been things like the Bog Oak Connemara, would have been working on the Green Ore aged expressions with Knoll, would have been working on the Quebecan, both the aged Quebecan and the non-aged statement Quebecan, and distilling the pot still whiskeys down in Quebecan, all of those sorts of projects, right? Would have been working with the beginning of Cooley looking at different casks. So we had the Madeira and the port and the sherry for the Turconnell series, right? And it was like, okay, well, what else are we going to look at there? Those sorts of projects. But all of those projects wouldn't have involved the Teeling family casks. The Teeling family casks were in a separate warehouse that really Teeling employees didn't go into, or sorry, Cooley employees didn't go into.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came back down, taking off the Cooley hat and putting on the Teeling hat, right, as a Teeling employee, and started asking questions about what's the story with these 1991 casks, people would say, I don't know, no idea. Like they've been sitting there for 5-6 years, don't really know much about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all right, well, let's try and see what we're going to do here, right? And some of it was kind of obvious. There was some that were in hogsheads, right? And so hogsheads typically is a sherry cask, and you taste those, and you're like, yeah, I get a sherry flavor off of that. Okay, these ones over here are 91 sherry casks. These ones over here are in bourbon casks, but bourbon casks, they could be bourbon casks, they could be Irish whiskey casks, they could be rum casks, they could be tequila casks. It wasn't really clear as to like what the previous cask fill was on it. And as I started to go around and to sample them and try and make some sense out of it, right, I noticed that like some of them had a smoky flavor and some of them didn't. And it was like, but I literally like was in the warehouse with samples in a glass and was like saying to the guy that had just brought the pallet down off the stack, like, smell that. Like, do you get a smokiness? He was like, oh yeah, yeah. And you're like, okay, smell this. There's no smokiness. He was like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, like that's, I'm not trying to trick you, right? Like I'm not. This isn't a game. I mean, like smoky, non-smoky, right? I'm not crazy, right? There's definitely smoke here, and there's definitely nothing in that one, right? And so you had to try and make sense of the tea leaves. You had to try and look at the tea leaves and try and figure out what to do, and that's what became that whiskey, right? The 21-year-old. The 21-year-old was reading the tea leaves, and what I thought that whiskey back in 2012 was probably around a 90, 95 euro bottle of whiskey, right? And Jack wanted to sell it for 120. And so the question was, okay, what are we going to do to make this 120 euro bottle of whiskey, right? To be fair, in retrospect now, you say that was a steal deal. Like, are you kidding me? 120 euros for that bottle of whiskey? Like that's a bargain. But at the time, that was probably around what the fair market price was for it. And so the solution was the whiskey, as we were tasting the cask, they had this explosion of fruit, right? An amazing nose, a little bit of smokiness to them. And then the flavor just fell off a cliff. There was no finish, right? And that's what the real problem was with it. There was just no like real interesting, depth of character or continuing flavor that I got on it, right? And so we knew that was the issue. How do you fix that problem? And one of the things that we had heard through Glenn Morangi, of all places, through Dr. Bill, was Sauterne casks. That Sauterne casks were a great whiskey. He experimented with a lot of different cask types, and so we're like, great, okay, we've been looking actually for Sauterne casks for a while. Sauterne casks are very expensive. Sauterne casks, you're talking about 700 to probably 1,200 euros for a Sauterne cask, and hard to find. So we had no experience actually with using Sauterne casks, and I'll never forget we got an order in of Sauterne casks. Right, we had them all laid out there. They're lovely casks. They structurally were great. They're high quality French wine casks, which in the cask world is about as good as it gets. And we emptied the whiskey out of the bourbon casks, right? And we were going to fill it into the Sauterne cask. And I remember looking at the tank, and it was a pretty big tank going up. And I remember thinking, like, damn, that's a lot of whiskey, right? Like, wow. And it's already in that $90 a bottle range, right? Are we going to get it up to 120? Is it really? I don't know. Like, and so for the first probably 3 months, I was religiously going up there to the warehouse every week and tasting it, and Luke, just not wanting to mess it up, just like not wanting to take a $90 bottle of whiskey and make it into a $75 bottle of whiskey, right? And just didn't want to mess this up, right? And it wasn't doing anything for the first couple months. It was like, it's not doing anything. I'm like, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. Like, we could still take it out. And then Christmas happened, right? And it sat in there over Christmas. And I got back up to the warehouse sometime around mid-January with all the other emails and things going on in the office, and tasted it. And I was like, oh, it's changed. There's a little bit, you can kind of see the direction that it's going in. I think it's working, right? And
And
like,
how old at this point would the whiskey have been? This is pre that 21 you just held up, is it?
yeah, this is probably 19 to 20-year-old
Mm-hmm.
whiskey. Yeah, so September 91, we're talking about January 2012.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
So,
didn't mean to interrupt. I was just trying to place where we're at here, because yeah.
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 So it's
By
it's
by
got
that
a good
January, it
age to it.
obviously changed. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And yeah, and it just started getting better and better and better. And the more we left in it, and if anything, I think with what you'll see in the progression from the 24 to the 28 to the 30-year-old is the question is, how long can you leave a whiskey in a sauterine cask for? I don't know,
Forever.
but however long you want, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just seems to be getting better.
And you had, because that 21 was released as vintage reserve, but you had platinum reserves and a few other kind of ones like that with big age statements on them. What was before we jump
There
right
was
in?
a 26 and there was a 30. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. The
And
gold.
were they all from the same batch from this family reserve? Were they? No.
Well, yeah, they're all from that same family reserve. Yeah, but you're talking about 1987 and 1983 were the other ones, and a lot less. Where we might have had, I don't know, it's rough numbers. I don't know, 90 of the 91s. We had like maybe like 20 of the 87s and like maybe like 7 of the 83s. Like there was really not a lot of the older stuff. The 83s, I was terrified. If I was a little scared of the 91s, the 83s, I was like terrified of. We had thoughts of trying to get the cognac casks to put them in. Thank God we couldn't get our hands on cognac casks, because like that whiskey really should have just been left in the bourbon cask that it was and just do its thing.
Yeah. So well let's go. Let's jump in. We're 20 minutes in. We may as well get into the
sure. We'll
the
taste the
tasting of it.
whiskey. Why not?
So it's obviously January 2012, and then you release the 21-year-old after that, and then you fast forward to, was it 2017 when this first came out? 2016.
I got the bottle right here, so we can look on it. We are talking about bottled in 2016, August 2016 is what this one is. Yeah, so there's about that's all I have. People think like, oh, you must have like a library of whiskey there for the team. Like, no, like that's what I've got, right? And every Friday night, it's a question of like, how drunk am I going to get to want to get into it again, right? Like, will the Brabazon do? or yeah.
Presumably referring to the library of whiskey. Owen says, no, that's hidden in the Brabazon house. Is it, or is that?
Yeah, there's a bit of it there in the Brabazon house. Yeah, so it's actually Jack's house. If you want to know who has it, it's Jack Teeling's house. That's hidden. Yeah.
Well, before we taste the 24, we have a couple of questions in there. Niall asks, how long does it generally take for a cask to impart flavor? Does it depend on the prior liquid in the cask?
Yeah, it depends on the prior liquid of the cask and also whatever the previous contents of that cask was. So you can imagine something like, let's say, a gin cask, right? If it has those botanicals in it, it's going to impart those botanicals quite quickly. That could happen in a number of days, right? If it's something that's more of a subtle layering onto a whiskey, it could be a long time. Like the cognac, it takes, I'd say, 18 months to get any kind of real cognac flavor coming into an Irish whiskey, in my experience with them, at least. Yeah.
And obviously you've got rather than the previous content, you've obviously got tannins and natural oak flavors, and then obviously you're looking for that, they called micro oxidations within the cask, where even if it's not getting flavor from the wood, the whiskey is evolving and maturing because the wood is breathing at the same time.
Of course, yeah. So it depends upon what kind of whiskey and what do you want to do. That's the engineering part, right? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to put a finish onto it? Are you trying to give it a bit more sweetness? Are you trying to take it in a totally different new direction? Like what's the desire? Why are you putting it into this cask? And is it going to be more of like a double maturation, or is it going to be a finish? I'd say a finish for me is probably 9, 12 months, something like that. Some people it could be 3. Sometimes some people do it for a very short period of time. And I wouldn't really. I just don't think that there's the depth of complexity of flavor if you go for like 3, but unless it's something like a gin cask or something that's very impactful.
Yeah, well, 3 months does seem very, very short. The Jerry's tab S7 Plus has said, speaking of Sauterne, would be interested to know what would be the result from a Yakim case, which is obviously I pronounced that wrong, but I believe is a brand of Sauterne wine. I'm not au fait with with Sauterne wine, so my apologies for my ignorance. Do you know that brand, Alex? Or
no, I'm not familiar with that brand. I know that there's in that region of, we're talking about Bordeaux. No, yeah, we're talking about Bordeaux, where Sauterne is there along the river. There's Sauterne, there's Cognac, there's sorry, not Cognac, Lupiac, there's Cadillac also. And there's another one that starts with an M that's really kind of weird. But there's all of these sort of rich, semi-sweet dessert type wines that are made, and like with Cadillac, it like is literally a creek. It's like one side of the creek you're in Sauterne, and then the other side of the creek you're talking about Cadillac.
Well, this Jerry has exposed our ignorance, because I just googled it there, and these seem to be all Sauternes that go for 700, 400,000 euros a bottle. So it's obviously one of the higher end brands there. There, he's just said there it's a top Grand Cru of Sauterne. So there you go. We'll know that for when we're doing this next year. But that's
a fair point there, Luke. That's one of the things that I love about using these casks. They're just casks in general. So you learn something about that. The Calvados was a great example for me in that of somebody was saying like, oh, is it pear or apple Calvados? No, I wasn't even really aware that there was pear Calvados. And then I went to the warehouse and it's like, oh, there's the tall, narrow cask. Those have got a pear taste, and the short, fat ones have got like apple pie. Like, now I understand what's going on here. Yeah.
No, very good. Because I'm trying to think of how we could say, if I repeated the question and then we'll answer, go, yeah, no, that would be really interesting, Jerry's tab, and then we can cut out the last 5 minutes. Yeah. Well, let's come on to the 24-year-old. So do you want to talk us through what we're tasting here?
That nose hasn't changed. That rich, fruity, really distinct.
This is also coincidentally the same thing you said when we logged on before we went live.
Yeah.
So when you saw my face, it's a bad joke. My apologies. I'm going to stay quiet for a bit.
All right, will we give it a taste?
It's pretty good whiskey, Alex.
That's a pretty good whiskey.
That finish always never stops to surprise me, no matter how many times I've tried and different batches
prickly,
of this.
Little spiciness to it that it has there, but there's that honey sweetness, right? And then it does it right there. It's doing it right there. The hair is going up on the back of the arm, right? When I was blending that whiskey, it was, does it have the nose? Does it wait 4 seconds? Do you get marzipan, right? And then do the hairs on the back of your arm go? That's because it's such an explosion of different flavors, right? How do you like pick out like this has got more pear, or this has got more plum, or this has got more pineapple, or this has, you know what I mean? Like where do you draw the line with such a rich and complex liquid, right? And what I happen to have the bottle right here. What I had to do was break it down by cask and say, okay, this one is cask 30, 31, 32, and 17, right? And that's what went into bottling number 3 for the 21-year-old. And would have done that for each one of the bottlings. Would have been like, okay, we're going up to the warehouse. It's not a whole lot of casks we're going to pick out here, guys, right? It's not like we need to select some big file on Excel or whatever, right? I like that one and that one, not that one, that one over there. Yeah. And just pick the best. Just go for the best.
Yeah, but Cormac says I get sweetness and some leather. At first I didn't get a lot of those leather earthy notes, but the more you kind of sit with it, the more the kind of tobacco leather kind of seeps through in the right at the very background. Yeah. But it is quite citrusy on the nose in a way you wouldn't expect as well. And then
but there's also that little earthy nuttiness there. You just was counting it down 4 seconds. You get that little rich almond, right? Which sometimes in a whiskey can be over dominating, right? What I found in trying to blend this with the first one's really by the seat of your pants, just like, right, how are we going to, let's just put it into 2 groups. I like it, I don't like it, right? And then you're looking at this group over here of casks, and you're like, what is it that I like about those ones? I like that it's got that little nuttiness, right? There's that earthy, like you said, leathery, kind of rich, umami kind of mushroom kind of thing going on there with all the fruit and that little bit of dusty smokiness that's there to it, right? But there's still that spice, but it's really, I'm going to concentrate on that nuttiness. These all have a nuttiness to them. Some of them are spicier than others. Some of them are sweeter than others, right? But let's just pick the ones that have the nuttiness and see what happens there. And that was the breakthrough. And
the first time I tasted this, which is a long time ago, when it was not long after it first came out, I distinctly remember being surprised by how that wisp of kind of woody smoke that was in the background that I'm not getting as much tonight. But you mentioned some of the casks were smoked earlier on. How did you handle those smoke casks from that collection? Were they married in with unpeated stock, or did you how did you do it?
Yeah, because what ended up happening is you say, okay, cask 30 and 31, you get in an argument with somebody, Jack or Stephen or somebody else in the office, as to like, was that smoke, or was that peaches, or was that this, or was, and I thought, okay, let's just put that out of the picture. The smoke will figure itself out, but I can't get rid of it, right? And if I just try and hunt for it, it's not going to be balanced with everything else. So let's just go with like gut feeling of like, yes, that one there.
No, definitely. I mean, Cormac in the chat has said he definitely gets some of the light smoke. The more I go at it, the more it comes through.
It comes and goes. It will be, there's times where you open up the bottle and you're like, how, that's so smoky, like how did you not? And there's other times it's like, not really getting the smoke off of this. I get lots of fruit.
So take us forward to 2018 or 2019, when this then wins world's best single malt?
Yeah, that was a surprise. That was a real shock to me. I actually thought that it had won the year before. The year before, Old Peculiar had won, and I was part of the tasting panel that year, and it was like whiskey number 8 in the finals, and I remember tasting it and like scoring. Like when I'm in a whiskey panel, I will fully admit, Luke, that I'm not an unbiased judge, right? It is try and find the Teeling whiskey, and then once you convince yourself that that's your whiskey, right? Then, oh my gosh, number 7's amazing. Number 7 is so unbelievable, right? And in the final, I was like, I really like number 7. And everyone else at the table was like, number 7's unbelievable. This number 7's great. I'm like, all right, I don't even have to sell this. Like these people genuinely like number 7. Like that's I think it's our whiskey. I think we got a winner here, right? And then
it is amazing that wisdom of crowds. I mean, when we're hosting the Irish Whiskey Awards now this year, all the packs went out to individual addresses because of COVID. But I'm talking about previous years when you would have met with the Cork Whisky Society or the Irish Whisky Society and hosted the tasting, and you'd be sitting there having poured all the samples, and people go over and they're doing their sheet. Obviously, they have no idea what it is. But if one person goes, "Oh, lads, try B29. Oh, it's gorgeous," suddenly B29 is going to score high. Like, you know, it's not, although they're blind tastings and they don't know they're preferencing a brand, there definitely is that crowd influence on proceedings, like, you know.
Yeah. And I've gotten into it with other members on the panel who are like, "You're trying to, you know, beat us. You're trying." I'm like, I'm just having a conversation. We've had 9 whiskeys, guys, right? Like, how, if we're gonna sit around a table and drink whiskey all day and not talk, like what's the point of this, right? Why?
But it is a bit like a dad in a football match where you're, you know, the other parents around you don't know which one's your child, but you just go, "Geez, number 11 he's very good, isn't he?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, he's decent." "Oh yeah, it's my lad."
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Yeah, with a foot on him, Jesus, like a pure striker.
Wand of a left foot.
Yeah.
So it came as a surprise anyway. But I
Complete
imagine
surprise.
it in a very present one. It's the first ever Irish single malt to win that award. Am I wrong, or?
Yeah, no, that's the first time an Irish single malt has won that award. Yeah, and the only time an Irish single malt won that award.
And that's an incredible achievement, like.
Yeah, and a real honor, for the Teeling Whiskey Company, but also I think for Irish whiskey. I think it probably says more about where Irish whiskey was, and that had reached a level where they could give it that award, right? Where it didn't have to be your Macallans and your Glenfiddichs and your, you know, the big time scotches, right? It could actually be an Irish whiskey that would be legitimately the best whiskey in the world.
And the obviously we mentioned the Cooley Distillery and the Teeling Family Reserve, but you also mentioned with that Platinum Reserve, as you mentioned, 1983. There's obviously whiskies in that collection that aren't all distilled at Cooley, or am I wrong there? Or
yeah, of course. Yeah.
And this was distilled at Cooley, was it? Or
this was distilled on an island of Ireland, on the northern half, I would say.
Right. But I suppose that was the question without putting a finer point on it, because we've tried over the course of these. Sorry.
Some of that stock wouldn't have been triple distilled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there is the famous double distilled Bushmills of the 90s. That's legendary stuff amongst these amongst the Irish whiskey nerds.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because we've tried doing these tastings during lockdown. We've tried loads of different brands that, well, we're obviously, you know, some of them are like yourselves, have distilleries and others don't, but they obviously are at some point using third-party stock. And the early 90s stuff, whether it's from Cooley or Bushmills, Irish whiskey from like 89, 90, 91, 92, it's just some of the most phenomenal whiskey you'd ever try. Like it's amazing stuff.
Yeah,
like, you know, which this is testament right to. They definitely were. Yeah. Where did it all go wrong, huh?
Yeah, what happened? Yeah, and but I think it's also a fair point there, Luke, of both ourselves or somebody else, right? Of that whiskey wasn't that whiskey until we put it in the Sauterne cask.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, it might be. Some people might view it as being a lesser or smaller thing to say, okay, cask 30, 31, 32, and 17 we're going to use. But there's that final hurdle to cross, right? It's not that like all the work was done in 91 and any fool could come in there with a dart and just pick a winner, right? Like
Well, the other examples that I just mentioned, the other casks or bottles of whiskey from this period that are floating about, they're all very good. But this is and I'm not just saying it because we're sitting here with you, Alex, but this is a cut above the rest, and that's testament to the fact that this stock has passed through a number of different hands, but you were able to turn it into the world's best single malt. So yeah, no, I wasn't by talking about its provenance, I wasn't trying to take credit away from you guys. Cormac says because of the 1990 World Cup, everyone was still pissed for the next 2 years. Yeah, there wasn't a, they say there won't be a cow milked in Galway tonight or whatever. There won't be a still fired up in Bushmills tonight. So you obviously we've from everything we've gone through up to the, we don't have the 21 here, but you mentioned the 21 and then we've come to the 24. Could you maybe talk us through the thought process leading to the 28-30? Was it as simple as let's leave it? It's good. It's going good. Let's keep it going. Or was there,
there was a bit of that. There was also, to be really honest, like after winning the award, there was a view of like, oh Jesus, like now if the spotlight wasn't on us before, now it really is. Right now we've got to really do this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would have openly said to the guys in the warehouse, like, I know we're only going to pick 5 casks, right? And I know we don't have a lot to choose from, but we've got to pick the 5 right casks for this, right? It's
and was there extra stock that you had all transferred into the Sauterne cask at the time, or after the awards did you quickly go, look, we got this 26-year-old ex-bourbon, let's put get more of this into Sauterne
casks? No, it was mostly in the Sauterne cask. It's mostly been in the Sauterne cask. Yeah, there would have been a couple of second fills from the first and second filling of the 21, right? Where you got 15 empty Sauterne casks, and you're like, well, what are we going to do with it? Well, we still have 40 of the bourbon casks, so we'll fill those into the second fill Sauterne cask. There's a bit of that was going on, but for the most part, it was all the same stock that was going into the same Sauterne cask. Mm-hmm.
So was it you mentioned 5 casks there? Was it 5? Was that the DNA for the first one as well? Was it a marriage of 5 Sauterne casks, and you kept that the whole way up, or?
Yeah, it's always been around that number, mm-hmm. right? There's a give or take. Each cask has a different fill level in it, right? They're going to have different evaporation rates and whatnot. But in general, you're talking about, I'd say 5 to 7 casks for a bottling run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, very good. So will we jump into the 28 or?
Yeah, yeah.
I know I've kept just a suggestion for people at home.
Yeah,
I've kept a small bit of the 24 for comparison. So just because we're moving on to the 28, if you can, maybe don't neck back the rest. That's just an idea.
So the 28, like I said, there's a lot of pressure to not mess it up, but yeah, I think you can see like that nose is still there.
It's even more kind of peachy and citrusy.
That was the next point I was going to make. It gets more fruity, and the smoke comes down a bit. And whatever happens in those 4 years, the peat, and it's not as prickly. It's not as spicy as it.
There's a bit more almonds, maybe a bit of even chocolatiness on the. Yeah, like chocolate in a warm car, like like in the sun.
Yeah, but still a lovely whiskey. Dangerously drinkable. That is pretty smooth.
But you're right. You don't get that smokiness as much, at least on the first sip. It's even a bit more of that kind of sweetness, kind of vanilla, honey. Just comparing.
I had a friend of mine from growing up. Just I don't know, for whatever reason, is reminded of the saying. He said I wouldn't kick it out of bed for eating cookies. Like,
I wouldn't kick it out of bed for munching on potatoes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, was this back in the day when you wanted to have the truck with the dog in the back and all this? Or?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Yeah,
Owen says almost a light chocolate, but with spice still. No,
yeah. There is
100%.
still.
Yeah. Hmm. This one reminds me even a bit more. The other one is obviously very spicy, but this one is much more. Just reminds me of Christmas in a weird way, and I don't literally mean in the cliched way where people say, "Oh, Christmas cake whiskey," but just the types of foods that fill the house at Christmas time, rather than the more cliched Christmas cake flavors. If
Mhm.
if that makes sense, even though it's a really weird way of saying it,
But there is that simple syrup kind of sweetness to it.
Mm.
There is that, leathered fruits.
No, it's incredible. And
And you can see how, like, if you're in a blind tasting and you get something that has that kind of fruit profile and that little bit of sweetness and that little bit of spice, you know it's at 46% alcohol, then you think that's boom, number seven. Number seven's ours.
that's my whiskey.
Lock on to number. Jesus, number seven's gorgeous. Oh my God.
Is that how? Because particularly that single malt winner the award. Sorry, I've lost my ability to speak there. How is it? Is it like a tasting panel, or how are those decided? Like, obviously, if you go into more
Yeah, they have
detail on
several
that.
rounds. They've got like a first round, a second round, and a third round. The single malt category has become incredibly crowded over the years. When, like, if you go back 8-9 years ago, it was predominantly Scotland, Japan, right? Ireland was in there too. Where else? Like, you might have a few, like Tasmania or Cavalan with their single malt that they're making in Taiwan, right? But, like, there wouldn't have been many single malt producing countries, right? Now, when you look at the list of, like, who's getting into the final, it's 30 whiskeys, right? With, like, single malt coming from Egypt, single malt coming from, like, all over the place, and it gets very complicated, very muddy, very complicated.
Yeah, no, it is amazing the amount of spirits that are around the world. I mean, someone asked me in the bar the other day. They said, "Oh, is there any English whiskies?" And I said, "Oh no, there is a few." And they're like, "Oh, I've never heard of them." And I looked it up, and there's like 26 distilleries making whiskey in England. And you think that we talk about Irish whiskey being in a boom, and we don't have. I mean, we do now because we're up to 40 something, but up until recently, England actually had more distilleries than us, despite what we would have, what you'd think, when you think of Irish whiskey, and no one knows any English whiskies in general. Like, the average man on the street doesn't. Like, it is amazing. French whiskies, German whiskies. It's amazing what's out there at the moment.
Yeah, Sweden, right? Finland. There's a whole world whiskey category that's out there. Tasmania has, like, I think 8 or 9 distilleries down there, and I'm sure that's probably even an underestimate by these days. They're all over the place.
We did a Paul John Indian whiskey tasting here a few months back, and they were actually they were phenomenal whiskies.
Yeah, they have been for a number of years.
Yeah, I tried the Amrat and a few other Indian whiskies, and I was like, it's all right. But the Paul John ones, they'd stand up to maybe not what's in front of us now, but a lot of Irish whiskies they would.
Yeah, they would definitely.
There's a friend of mine living in Iceland, and they've got a distillery around the corner from them, but apparently they're finding it very hard. The whiskies aren't aging as much as they would have hoped. I suppose when you're trying to mature above the timberline, it must be hard, all the ways up there. But there you go. That's a different type of challenge. Jerry's tabbed at 7 says Cavalan is a Singapore, if I'm not mistaken. It is. It's another fantastic whiskey.
I thought Cavalan was like King Tar.
It's Taiwanese, no?
Taiwanese, yes.
Taiwanese, yeah. Cormac has got me a bottle of the 20-year-old Hammerhead from the former
Hammerhead,
Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
That's a very nice whiskey.
Yeah. And Jane says Cairo.
Finland. Those guys are nuts. Those guys are all about the rye. they've been, in fact, that gin cast, when I was saying gin cast, we had Cairo gin casts that we've aged whiskey in. They're really great guys.
The Owen has a question about speaking of distilleries. He says, has there been competition with the Dublin Liberties distillery, which is obviously literally right behind you, isn't it? On the
right
down
next
there.
to us.
Or is it the opposite? Have you got possible collabs coming up?
We haven't talked about collabs. I haven't actually done any collaborations with other Irish whiskey distilleries. That's an interesting point. It's not like I hate those guys. Like, there's no way, like, spit on the ground when they walk by. Like, there's no animosity or anything like that. But I hadn't even thought about, like, would we do something with the Liberties, or would we do something with the Lions, or yeah.
Well, if you're using, did you mention on one of the tastings we did before that you're using some Great Northern grain? So is that technically a collab?
Yeah.
There you go. And Cooley malt and other malt. You're collabing all the time. You just don't know it.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. Yeah. Yeah, that could be interesting, couldn't it?
Well, there you go. Look what you've started on.
Yeah.
Cormac says, why feed another shark in the tank? Well, imagine it'd be more dangerous to not feed the other shark in the tank. That makes for a more volatile situation. But
yeah,
maybe I'm misreading that metaphor.
Also, yeah, Jack, when he was addressing the Celtic whiskey, the wards there up in Powers Court, like I think that Irish whiskey is in a position where we're trying to fight other whiskeys, right? It's the fight is with Scotland, the fight is with Canada and bourbon. The fight really isn't internally. Like, I know some people try and make out about rivalry or this or that, but like I don't really think that there's any kind of real rivalry internally with Irish whiskey. It's not like I'm coming out here and being like, oh, Bushmills is crap. Like, no, I'm a big fan of Bushmills whiskey. It's not like I love IDL's stuff. I love what Louise is doing. I love silky whiskeys. Like, there's lots of other great whiskeys that are made around Ireland. So yeah, but I never thought about it. We could do a collaboration with somebody else.
Well, another distiller down here, down in this part of the country rather than upper year, there was a distillery opening nearby, and I said to them, "Oh, is this competition, or how do you feel about this?" And he was like, "I'm delighted," because he says, no matter what I do, I'm going to have competition. I'd rather that competition was on my doorstep than and we can bring people down here, create a whole thing, like rather than have the competition be in Northern Ireland or Dublin. Like it's at least I can have my eyes on them here. So I was like, well, that was a good answer to that. But
yeah, and I guess in fairness, like, if you're going to, let's say, a bar in Los Angeles and you're doing a presentation on Teeling whiskey, right? Let's be honest. The next week, there's a guy from Cavalon that's coming in. There's a guy from, Jack Daniels that's coming in. There's a guy. There's loads of other. It's not just like, oh, the people come out to drink the whiskey when Alex Chasko is in town showing or pouring Teeling. Like, they're doing that all the time, and that's great, right? I go back to the craft beer days, right? That the real thing is that you want somebody drinking Hefeweizen, Pale Ale, IPA, Porter, Stout, all of those other, you don't want them to all just be drinking fizzy yellow lager.
Yeah. No, definitely, yeah. Could not agree more, and I'm sure most people listening here would agree as well.
I'm curious as to what. Okay, we just do the 24 and the 28. If you had to drink, a desert island whiskey out of those two,
I'd probably go for I think the 24 is more rounded. It's more subtle. It's less punchy. Just my personal opinion. 28 is what I meant. And Niall said 28, and Cormac says close, but for me the 28. And that's interesting because I'd always try and in my stubbornness almost deliberately go for the 24 because you don't want to be sucked in by the idea that it's 28, ergo it must be better, but in this case I think it genuinely is. So obviously you had it, brought it forward 4 years in this case. So tell us about the 30-year-old. Is there, or are we just going to be going around the houses again?
Well, the 30-year-old is the same whiskey, same casks, right? And again, go up to the warehouse and pick the 6 or 7 that you think are the best. So I'm curious as to what people think of it. From me, what's interesting with the 24, I'm always talking in analogies, and maybe this is a bad analogy, but I'm always trying to strive for that original hit. You're always trying to recreate the magic of that one previously. I think the 30-year-old is an amazing whiskey. I would be surprised if the 30-year-old doesn't win.
Just to because obviously I don't think we said this because we were talking about the 24-year-olds award, but the 28-year-old won the best single malt as well at the World Whiskey Awards.
Oh yeah, look, they've all won an amazing amount of awards, right? So the 24-year-old, when that won world's best, right? That's an award that I had targeted. I had once the Old Peculiar won and we didn't. I was like, what do we got to do? What I think we talked about it before. There was the Brabazon 3 and Brabazon 4 had a marked step up, right? That was in response to not winning that award. It was like, right, okay, what are we gonna do to win this award? What do we got to okay, let's stop messing around here. Let's get serious, lads, right? And so and you've got, I think that the Revival and the Renaissance series improved because of that focus. I think that the Brabazon series definitely improved because of that focus, right? It was let's make this work. What I was shocked was that we already had the winner, right? The winner was already there. That I wasn't expecting. That was the part that was like, holy cow, right? Yeah, the 28-year-old, just trying not to fuck it up, just trying to keep it going and make another great whiskey. And has won, loads of different awards. You talk about the Spirit Masters awards. It's won the best Irish single malt. It's won a boatload of awards. And then delighted for that, right? You're always happy to win. I always say I never try to make an award, but I just said, I actually was trying to win an award. I was like, what do we got to do to?
Well, that's what separates you, Alex, from Declan O'Neill's football club. No? You're about winning.
Yeah, but I'd say that, Luke, right? Even the losers get lucky sometimes, right?
That's true. Jane says, what award are you most fond of? Or Jan, is it? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, or sorry. Yeah, I didn't know.
What award am I most fond of? I think that winning the Irish Whiskey Award from the Celtic Whiskey Awards there with the Muscat cask, that was really great because it's being voted on by the clubs, by the people that know Irish whiskey, right? I was also a sweet element there of I know that another whiskey company had PR agencies and cameramen there ready to take pictures of them winning that award, and were visibly shocked and appalled at the fact that we had not them. So
well, that's always a bonus.
That's a good one. Yeah. I'll admit I was shocked too. I'll never forget Ali standing up there and saying it was a very close count. It was only 1 or 2 votes that made the difference in the end. And I was just like, whoa, somebody really squeaked out a winner here. I wonder who that was.
I wonder who it is. That's fantastic. No, excellent. Will we come on to the 30-year-old? So
sure. So the 30-year-old.
The 30-year-old's quite a recent release, isn't it? But
what's that?
This one's actually very recently, isn't it? It came out, or was it 12 months?
This is hot off the presses. This is less than a week, right? November 2021.
Yeah. Wow.
There you go.
And it's an absolute steal if you're looking to pick up a bottle for someone for Christmas. It's great value.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Considering it's definitely going to win World Whiskey of the Year, Single Malt of the Year next year, like, so.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, it's always great to win.
So it's best to buy it now before it doubles in price after having won the award. You see, that's the thing.
Well, look at that, right? At $120 a bottle, you would be hard pressed to find somebody who's got a dusty one of those in the corner that would let it go for 120, right?
No, 100%, 100%. Although you want to be drinking it rather than selling it anyway, Alex. But,
well, I'm always drinking it. That's the there's only like 3 bottles that I have that are ones that like are I'm never gonna open up.
Jerry's asked, or I don't know if it's Jerry or Jerry's Tab S7. I don't know if the phone has become sentient, but to Alex, what would you consider being your signature making a whiskey? What's your signature?
You know what's funny? I didn't even realize this until right before COVID. There was a few brewers that came over from Portland, and there were guys that I didn't know from Portland. There's a whole, I think it's been 15 years since I lived in Portland, so there's a whole other group of brew pubs and brewers that, anyways, these guys were big whiskey fans, and they came over to Ireland, and then they found out that I was from Portland, and they were like, "Oh, we got to meet up," and we talked, right? And I started showing them the whiskeys there, right? And they started laughing at me, and they're like, "You blend whiskey like a brewer." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Because when you're brewing, you're adjusting your mash temperature to get the right amount of sweetness, right? You're adjusting your hops to have the bitter and to balance out the fruit from the yeast, right? You don't have a whole lot of, you've got a lot of decisions to make, and there's a lot of places where things can go wrong, but you don't have a whole lot of tools that you can use to fix something when it's wrong, right? And so you try and set it up to have a nice nose, a nice taste, a nice finish. And I think that I probably subconsciously blend the same way that I would try and make a Hefeweizen have that residual sweetness, that nice body, the good mouthfeel, the fruitiness coming from the yeast, along with that clove, right? And yeah, that's the same approach that I take for whiskey. That would be my signature, I think.
Well, that's an excellent answer, and I hope Jerry's happy with that. There's a couple more great questions, but I might focus on the whiskey for one more second before we come on to them. So we're not ignoring those questions just for the people who've asked those. But Cormac said I get a lot of sweetness and some leather from the 30, same as the 24, 28, more honey and strawberries from this one. I definitely agree that the sweeter peachiness from that is there in the first one, but more pleasant second one is definitely more kind of.
You can see the progression of it, right?
Yeah.
There's a dusty hint of that spice. It kind of comes on a bit late, right? Whereas it comes on quite strong with the 24. It's still there, but it's a bit muted. And I think it's just that more honey, creme brulee sweetness to it that's there. Yeah.
Dusty is a good way of describing it. Yeah. This is it's a really, really interesting whiskey. Almost it's almost one you'd like to be able to kind of dissect on its own, because it's hard now, having tried the first two, not to think in that progression. Whereas this one, there's something about this that you kind of want to almost remove it from the equation and just focus on it, if that makes sense,
like on a Christmas night until 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm hoping if Julie Christie's listening, she'll buy me a bottle of this for Christmas, and I'll see if Ali will give me staff price on it, even though it's she'll be buying it, so we'll see. No, it's a gorgeous whiskey. We'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts. Meanwhile, while people are formulating those thoughts, we'll come to some of those questions. Declan says, "Can you talk about the 25-year-old from a rum cask, which I recently bought from a store?" We'll say, we won't say.
Yeah.
Whether or not he was trying to dodge juicy.
There's those. We would have had rum casks, right? We would have had hogsheads. We would have had bourbon casks. This is all of the bourbon casks. The rum casks, we've done a few different things with the rum casks. Some of them were released as single casks. If they're an exceptionally good single cask, we would have bottled that and then would have, sent that out to different partners around the world as single casks that they would have sold. The fair number that went to Japan. Off the top of my head, there was a few that went to Holland and to Belgium too. Trying to think of where else they took them. What we've tended to do from a sales perspective with this stock is use it as a bit of a carrot for other stock, right? So it's in the beginning it was really quite simple. The 21-year-old, buy 5 cases of small batch and we'll let you buy a case of the 21-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of an approach. So the 25-year-old probably was one of those single casks from what would have gone, my guess would be over to the Nectar or to Bresser and Timmer, and it's a beautiful whiskey, really, really lovely. Some of them we would have also finished. So we would have taken, say, the rum cask and put it into a PX cask, or we would have put it into cognac or other casks. But that was what we tended to do with the rum cask, was to either release them on their own as single casks or to finish them in other casks.
No, that's exciting. I mean, obviously you're talking about single casks there, but Cooley back in the day were before Beam Suntory were quite famous for having different ages and releases across different markets. Is that anything that still plays in your current strategy? Or
absolutely. We would have, I think we did maybe 60 of them last year, and it's a hangover from the Teeling brothers going out there and using them as a tool. We talk about them like they're drugs. They really are. The partners love them because they're exclusive, right? They only go to Germany or to Belgium or Holland or wherever, right? And they're a great way of trying to drum up interest in the brand from whiskey collectors and for people that are looking for very high-end single malt, right? And what we're trying to do now is to get more of like a halo effect, I guess is the term, of around the pot still, around the single malt, of trying to get interest in those through those single casks.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. The Niall McMahon has said, "Alex, every time I think of saving, you bring out another belter. Hope my family are okay with socks for Christmas." So there you
I
go.
love socks for Christmas. Socks and bottles of whiskey is perfect. Yeah.
No, I prefer bottles of whiskey than socks, but yeah, no, socks, nothing wrong with socks. My wife, Cormac says, my wife has refused to buy me whiskey for Christmas this year. There's too many bottles stashed for years in wardrobes and on shelves around the house. You need to be drinking them, Cormac.
That are within arm's reach of where I am. Stashed full of whiskey. Yeah. No,
brilliant. So no one seems to have any thoughts on the 30-year-old though, apart from the one comment we already received. Another comment there saying, "Have you tried Chinese Beiju before?"
Yeah, Beiju.
Beiju.
We haven't done specifically Beiju. We have done Mugi Shoshu, which is a Japanese version, I guess, of Beiju. Very interesting. Very distinct, and Beiju, of course, has like a whole spectrum of flavors there, with the stronger ones being highly acquired taste, I would say. Yeah.
I must check it out.
It's interesting. Look, they have a very, they all have the same, well, most of them have the same marketing idea around Bijou, which is basically that it's like liquid, oh geez, what's the blue pills from Pfizer?
Viagra.
Viagra, exactly. That's liquid Viagra. That's the whole, like their whole, they're like, ding, and you're like, okay, I get it, right? Like I get, like that's great and all, but it tastes like burning.
Hey, sex sells, like,
Yeah.
Jerry says, is there any Renaissance limited edition in the pipeline?
Renaissance limited edition, but I mean it is all limited edition, right? Yeah, there's more.
There was a new one very recently, was there? Only about
Yes,
a month
exactly.
ago.
Yeah, the Pinot de Charente, yeah. And there's going to be one more of the Renaissance, and then we're going on to, I can't even think of the R word. There's another R word that we're going to switch it up for.
Renewal. Well, you've done revival and you've done Renaissance.
Yeah.
What are you going to rejuvenation?
I suggested revelation.
Teeling, revelation, yeah. Deep regret or
regret.
Remorse.
Remorse. Yeah. For some reason, they don't like my ideas. Look, I don't know.
Mel says, are there any collabs on the horizon you can tell us about? Any more plantation, perhaps?
Oh,
you did a sommelier series recently, have you not?
Yes, yeah. There's more sommelier series to come. There are more collaborations to come. We've done one with the plantation that it's been a while. What's really, Alexander Gabriel is really an amazing man. He really, with his real love and warmth for cognac and rum and for gin and desire to experiment. So like he tasted the black pits, right? And his view with black pits was like, that's great. I want those casks. I'm like, okay, you want these casks? And I sent him, cast samples just to make sure, like, okay, these are the casks that you want. Yes, those are them. And what did he want to do with it? He wanted to put the plantation Stiggins, the pineapple rum, in black pits. So he's done that. And now he's got a fair amount of that he's going to release. And then we've got those casks back.
I feel like that would really work. Like, I mean, if you think of the
pineapple,
kind of, the pineapple, like smoky barbecue pineapple, it's like a lot of the early Cooley stuff from the 90s often gets described as like smoky bacon, like, and a lot of those early like Connemara single casks and stuff, and that especially ones that Cadenhead bottles. So imagine that, but pineapple, I imagine that would be amazing. Like, yeah,
it is, yeah, and it's one of these things that, like, when he was asking for it, and he told me what he was going to do with it, I was like, why didn't I think of that? Like, that's amazing. That's all right, great. There's like, you understand what I'm trying to do, and you can take my. So
we had Graham and Jarlathon last night from Dunbills, and they were talking about how they're they feel very much married to the idea that if you're doing peat, you have to have sweet to balance the astringency, like, and a lot of people now they're saying you have to have it, but I mean it makes sense, like, because it is something that seems so logical that you don't see enough of those, a really sweet cask. I mean, I think of the Smokehead by Ian McLeod. They do a rum cask one that's gorgeous, like, I don't know if you've tried it. So yeah,
I haven't tried that particular one. Yeah, I think you're right. There has to be fruit or some kind of other element to it. It can't just all be burning tires, right? It has to have something else to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So we look forward to that one. Owen says, how many cases of the 13-year-old single grain look to be left? It's a stunner.
I don't know. Owen is a short answer to that. I really You're right. It's a beautiful whiskey. It's that's one that's been in the warehouse for 3 years. I've been staring that in the face, and like it yeah, it's been extremely well received by people, and I think has really brought life back to the single grain too, which is great. And so there will be more, I think, single grain limited releases. There'll be more of these limited releases and these collaborations to try and, breathe life and excitement back into existing products. That's the whole point of the collaborations, is the beauty of small batch and the power of that rum cask influence on a blend. So you can put it into a pineapple rum cask, you can put it into a agricole rum cask, you can put it into a aquavit or a Riesling or a beer or what have you. Yeah, and it brings people back to small batch, hopefully.
Yeah, perfect. So we'd love to hear again any more questions or someone's thoughts, any further thoughts on the 30-year-old. Maybe people are just so stunned by the whiskey they can't articulate what they're going for. Meanwhile, is there anything else particularly about these ones or about some of the maybe potential releases that you haven't touched on that you wanted to bring up, Alex, before we finished?
I think really just a sense of gratitude as far as the success that people have made these whiskeys. I remember going to the Hague Whiskey Festival with the 21-year-old and with the small batch. And there was a guy who went around, and I saw him on the Friday. It's one of those weird whiskey festivals, actually 3 days. So I saw him on the Friday, and he had said, "Oh, I never heard of you before." And he was, tasting our whiskey, and I was like, "Here, I'll pour you the 21-year-old." And then I saw him meticulously go around to all the other stands and come back on the Sunday to us and say, "That's the best whiskey of the festival." I'm like, "What? This one?" I go, like, surely there's some pretty big stands here. Like, sure? He's like, "No, that's it. That's the one, right?" And it's been that level of personal fondness that people have had for this whiskey, and for hopefully this one to come, and for the 24-year-old, right, and the 28-year-old that has really made it a success, right? It's the awards are great to highlight it, but I think it's really just the enthusiasm that whiskey drinkers have for that, be it sharing samples from a bottle as part of a group, or buying a bottle for a special occasion and what have you. It's really been great to have people drink them.
Yeah, no, and it's great to have your whiskeys out there, and it's the Irish whiskey community, in terms of people like who are joining us in the chat, are fantastic. But obviously it's reciprocal relationship, in the sense that the fantastic Irish whiskey community who do share bottles and exchange of things wouldn't be there if it wasn't for brands like yourselves, so it's it's great, and long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cormac has asked, what's Jan or Jan says the 30-year-old is superb, definitely my favorite of these. A bit pricey for my budget, but I'm happy I had a chance to try it. The Cormac has asked for prices. Now, from what I can see at the moment, the Teeling 24-year-old is going on Celtic whiskey for 670. The 28-year-old is currently out of stock, and the 30-year-old, obviously fresh off the shelves, is 950.
A bargain to be had.
It is an absolute steal. But the Declan, the bottle, if you Google it, matches your top, but that's not a dig at Spurs. It's genuinely the color. You do have the box there, Alex, if you want to show.
Yeah. Fair enough. There you go.
See, it really does. I have it on the screen next to me here, and I can see his little box there, and I was like, oh,
yeah.
So.
That's perfect for Spurs fans, United fans.
Lovers of the former Principality of Burgundy and from the 14th century or whatever, So it's it's fantastic. No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you for your time, Alex. I'll let you get back to your Thanksgiving.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Before you leave, Niall says 30-year-old is fantastic. A lot more soft than the others, but the flavor is still fantastic. And I'd like to reiterate what was said by previously. I can't remember who said it. Saying that I'm glad we had the chance to try it. So it has been a fantastic evening. So thank you so much, Alex, and thank you everyone who joined us.
My pleasure. Cheers. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, enjoy your evening. And if there's anyone has any questions or anything that we didn't cover today, just drop me an email and we'll get it answered for you. You can reply to the link that the Zoom link was sent out to. So thanks very much, folks, and we'll talk to you again soon, Alex. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.